Up next on my trek through the IMDb Bottom 100, it's number 31. Oh no. I've been dreading this moment. I've been putting it off for some time, finding excuses, other potentially click-worthy movies that were coming out in theaters in the time it would take to make this video. When I first checked the list before watching, I thought the next one was Jaws: The Revenge. That would have been better, and I coincidentally would have started during Shark Week on the Discovery Channel. Get me in the spirit for when the channel actually plays something educational like it was created to. And I had also just happened to watch the original masterpiece a few days earlier on TV. But no, I messed up looking at the list. It's 365 days this day.
Class, instead of going to
365 days this day.
today, we'll be going to the
365 days this day. This is the second time the show has deprived me of a watch through of the Jaws films after the Fear.com episode, where, as I say in that video, Jaws 3D was up next, but it turns out Just Watch lied about where it was streaming at the time. But it's a good thing 365 days is a Netflix original, so it'll never go away. Yay. You know, it's times like these where I appreciate just how watchable Fear.com was. So this is the sequel to the controversial Polish erotic Netflix hit 365 Days, which I have since declared the worst movie I've seen to this series. At that time, the worst movie I've ever seen in general was during an online bad movie stream when I caught the masterpiece that is Kirk Cameron's Saving Christmas, a movie which was at one point number 1 on the IMDb Bottom 100. That was my least favorite movie ever. Until I saw this one. Yeah, it's that bad. And I watched it for you, the sequel to the video that honestly didn't even do much better than my usual tracking. I started watching it the day I found out that Ozzy Osbourne died. You know, just in case things weren't bad enough. Okay, before you get started, no, I wasn't upset in a way that affected my judgment here. In the original video, I watched and reviewed its spiritual predecessor, 50 Shades of Grey, first. Since then, I was planning on doing the same with 50 Shades Darker before this one, but that had left Netflix since then. So I guess I should probably be thankful that I only had to watch one terrible sex movie, even though I'm still almost 100% sure that this is the worst one. There isn't really a whole lot to say about the background here. For those of you who need catching up, the original was a 50 Shades copy from Poland based on the trilogy of erotic novels about a drug lord who kidnaps a woman and forces her to fall in love with him. A truly despicable human being. So anyway, she falls in love with him, and they have tons of graphic sex. It was almost unanimously hated, and its concept drew controversy with many angry letters and petitions to remove it. So it'll never go away. Yay. But despite that, it was still horny enough to become a massive hit on the platform among people who were sex-starved by COVID. So the two other books were filmed at the same time and premiered within a few months of each other. The pandemic delayed production, but they did eventually start filming in Italy and Poland, and both movies were out in 2022. This one had the same two directors as the original, Barbara Bielawas and Tomasz Mondes. Mondes also wrote the script alongside of Moisha Tiers and the book's author Blanka Lipinska. And this one became a critical darling that was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, and I'm just kidding, it was just like the original. Literally, the most positive rating on Metacritic says that it hates its viewers. On with the actual movie. So it wastes no time in getting to what to find the original. Right away it opens on a bunch of melodramatic shots of the girl before her wedding, and then the man steps in and they get into some really corny dialogue about their passion for each other or something. We're barely a minute in and the suck is already at unbearable levels. And then, of course, they have sex. Right off the bat, as if to remind you of the only reason anybody watches this crap. And all the while I'm asking, didn't she die at the end of the last one? Okay, no, I didn't actually believe that. But you see, at the end of the first one, the female lead, who's pregnant now by the way, is on the way to her wedding. But she gets intercepted by an enemy gang and her fate is left ambiguous, but judging by her boyfriend's reaction, it's not good. It's not explained until later what happened with that. There was a car crash and she lost her baby. Although at this point she's taking her miscarriage surprisingly well. It practically never comes up except as a plot point as the movie involves her keeping the pregnancy and miscarriage a secret from a new husband. No grief, no trauma, no nothing, because that would get in the way of the endless montages of sex and expensive shopping. Imagine waiting 2 years in suspense of what happens next, and this is what you get. And yes, these montages are endless. They make up the vast majority of the movie. I'd like to take back what I said about the miscarriage being a plot point, because there is no plot, especially in the first half. You know, a lot of the time when someone says there is no plot, they usually just mean it's a very simple plot, unless of course it's some kind of experimental film. Here, at least for the first half, there is literally no plot, just a string of montages and sex scenes. There are a few conversations between some of the characters, but there is no conflict. There's nothing to develop the characters. There's nothing to even make this even remotely interesting beyond the sex. They've stripped it down to the pure essence of what people want. Montages of people in exotic locations. Glamorous rich people stuff. And of course, a level of sex scenes that the 50 Shades movies wish they can get away with. Which I guess probably sounds good to fans. It's like the Fury Road of trashy sex fantasies. None of that pesky movie stuff to get in the way of the goods. The only difference is that Fury Road still had some semblance of a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and was actually able to keep these action scenes still fresh and interesting throughout. Fine, I'll admit I'm not the target audience for this. It's obviously for horny girls who fantasize about this stuff, including the whole being kidnapped and sexually harassed aspect. Hey, I've seen stuff online where women joke about the feminism leaving their body when something good but problematic comes on. I can't experience that myself because I'm a guy, and when the feminism leaves my body, horrible things happen. But it's literally nothing happening at all. Softcore porn interspersed with footage of a couple doing expensive things. One's a kidnapper and a rapist. The other is suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. Not exactly before sunrise where you're willing to watch them do stuff together because they're in love. Granted, the man is a lot less rapey here. To the best of my memory, the story of how they met is wisely never mentioned again. Case in point, the phrase sexual violence is absent from the rating information this time. Now all parents have to worry about is the smoking. I was thinking this would be a fun movie to watch with the family until I saw that part. Truly horrendous. I'll admit, the cinematography can be good at times, but the point is, why waste time on the softcore porn when you have easy access to hardcore porn? And that porn has more of a story too. As for the other montages, why not just stare at a screensaver or something? Anything's more interesting than this. But then about halfway through the movie, we get an inciting incident. You know, something that could have been the beginning of an actual movie. The main girl walks in on what appears to be her husband sleeping with his ex, and so she ends up fleeing to a different beautiful location with his gardener. And from that point on, still nothing happens. She buys more expensive stuff and daydreams about having sex with the hot gardener. You know, for all of the first 365 days' many, countless, almost overwhelming flaws, it at least had some kind of story. A very simple one, and a terrible one at that. But throughout the entire movie, it was clear that the movie was headed somewhere. Not a very good place, but somewhere. Something to look forward to. Here it just keeps going until the very last minute when it suddenly remembers that there needs to be a story for this to be considered a movie. It runs for almost 2 hours, it feels longer, and there wasn't 1 second where I didn't want it to just end already. It's not a slow burn, and it's sure as hell not experimental. Both of these would require ambition, or a script that at least tried to say or do anything smart or interesting, even if only at the end. But whatever, everybody only came for the sex scenes, and they are basically how they were in the original and in 50 Shades of Grey. Slow montages set to some moody pop song. Basically like a music video, but with boobs. I'm pretty sure most of the movie's budget went to licensed music, seeing as how the whole movie is basically just a music video. Except the music is kind of a step down from 50 Shades, at least in terms of notoriety. 50 Shades had some of the biggest names in music. For the soundtrack here, most of the artists don't even have a Wikipedia page. I'm not saying that bigger is better. Maybe if I listen to these songs more, I may like them as much as any other pop song, but I don't know where this is going. The point is the sex scenes are like the original. And that also means, like in those other two movies, the women show a lot more than the men. We don't even see any penises at all, which, is that a problem for sex scenes that are aimed at turning women on? Also, there's one scene on a golf course that's actually pretty hilarious in how hard it tries to be sexy. Ladies, does your fantasy involve a man putting golf balls into your vagina? Well, good news, this scene hints towards that. Anyway, at the last minute, they remember that there needs to be a story, so they come up with the most stereotypical soap opera twist possible. Something so cliche it's pretty much the go-to for parodies of soap operas. The male lead has an evil twin brother.
You had a twin brother all along? That's the big twist we were waiting for?
What a ripoff!
It turns out he was the one who she caught sleeping with her husband's ex. See, her man would never betray her like that. Why would anybody think that the rapey kidnapper would be a bad husband? And in the end, the girl gets shot and her fate is left ambiguous. She obviously isn't dead because there's another movie, but this girl just can't catch a break. First she's kidnapped, then she gets Stockholm Syndrome, then she has a miscarriage, now she gets shot. You know, this trilogy might not be the glamorous fantasy it thinks it is. At this rate, the entire trilogy will end with the audience wondering whether or not she's dead. But I predict that last movie will start with her completely okay right off the bat. Back to what I said about whether or not this is worse than Saving Christmas. At least Saving Christmas gave us something stupid and with a really backwards view of the holiday season that honestly has anyone else bought into. It has only slightly more plot than this movie, but at least it wasn't as repetitive. And while its messages are stupid, they are surprisingly harmless. 365 Days This Day doesn't mention many of the more problematic elements of the original, so it doesn't explicitly have all the implications about women and kidnapping, but they sure as hell do hang over this movie. You still have to be a complete psychopath to believe that these people should stay together. This movie made the feminism go right back into my body. I was thinking of ending this by saying that the worst part of it is that there's a third one and that I have to watch it at some point soon. But as it turns out, no, it's not on the list for some reason. I don't know why. It has a lower rating than a lot of other movies on the list. I'm just going to presume that it's just because not enough people saw it. and after this one, I don't blame them. You know, when I started this series, I decided that if I ever reached the top of the bottom 100, I'd just start back down at the bottom and do what wasn't streaming before. But lately, I've been thinking maybe I'd switch to the letterboxd equivalent of that list, and the next 365 days is on that, so that's not good for me, although it's number 11 out of 250, so that'll probably take many years to get to it, and my channel might not even live that long. I'm only seeing this piece of crap if there's demand for it. You know, there's a good chance I'll end up seeing this entire trilogy for this channel. There are a ton of classic movies I haven't seen, but I'd have watched all the 365 days movies. But anyway, whatever comes next on the IMDb list couldn't possibly be worse than this. If the list stays the same by the time I come to this series again, and so do all the streaming rights or whatever, that would mean that my next one would be some Indian movie I've never heard of called Adi Purush, which is streaming on Netflix. It's apparently almost 3 hours long, which doesn't look good, but at the same time it looks like an action movie, which should at least make it entertaining. Yes, I may be wrong, but I'm still 90% sure that this 3-hour movie would still feel shorter than this 2-hour monstrosity. And if I'm wrong, then it would be quite the accomplishment on their part. This is complete garbage. No redeeming value except for maybe some good shots. It couldn't be easy to make something worse than the original, but they somehow managed it. Congratulations. You know, I'm thinking of putting this at somewhere like 11 or 12. It's not quite as good as Superman The Quest for Peace, but I'm kidding, it's dead last, obviously. And while looking at that area, I think Hobgoblin should be above Left Behind. Kind of debating putting it over Mortal Kombat Annihilation too.